go through the spoil timing command. There's a lot of topics to cover in this movie, so we'll move along at a very fast pace. There's two main ways to create a spoil file. The first one is with surface mine reserves. It'll generate quantities of these pits and create a spoil placement file. Under the surface mine reserves, there's a drop down for output spoil file, and I'll just turn it on to non-key only, so the overburden and inner burden and partings will be placed into the spoil and backfill dumps. Hit OK and grab the elevation pre-calc model, and we'll just grab everything to run it as an example. Select the inclusion pit lines. And then here's the prompt. We're waiting for the spoil placement file to write, and I'll browse and I'll call it the surface reserves spoil file. So that's one option, one method to generate the volume of material from each pit block to be placed into the spoils. The second one is from reserves surface equipment timing. This will take not only just the pit but also the various benches and the time periods and create a spoil placement file which you can then sequence out. So this is the more advanced method and probably the most commonly used method. I'll quickly run a surface equipment timing run to show you how that spoil file gets generated. Under surface equipment timing, select the pits that have direction and quantities already from reserves. We'll just take the starting date of 1/1/12. And I have shovel 1 and 2, benches 1 and 2 already assigned. We'll just hit calculate. It finished in about a year and 3 months. Detailed report. And here's the two options we should use: output spoil file and output period grids. This will create the grid sequence file that will let you then play it back as a movie to not only see the mining pit progression, but then the backfill and spoil will progress with it as well. Hit OK, and this is the grid sequence file. This is the output period grid, so it needs the top and bottom grids and the individual bench grids. So now it's running through and mining out the quantities stored in the pit blocks, and it's generating the spoil placement file. And each one of these will be a month, and they're 2 benches deep. Okay, with spoil placement file to write, I'll browse and I'll overwrite this one called equipment timing. And that's the file then that we will load up into our timing sequence. So I'll go ahead and clear this timing map. We don't need these colored blocks on the map any longer. And in the drawing now, what I have prepared are spoil in-pit polylines, spoil 1, 2, 3, and then also we have some out-of-pit spoil polylines. So a very simple example will be take this box cut pit 1 and we'll spoil it out over into these, and then we'll take the dump from pit 2 and spoil into pit 1. I'll go through and sequence all that, and then we'll time it out. Spoil placement timing under spoil pull down. It says select all directional spoil polylines. They should have names, directions, and quantities. Alright, we'll define a new fleet. We'll just call it fleet 1. You can have various truck fleets. You can have an in-pit haulage and out-of-pit haulage, whatever you're after. And we'll take it 1,000 cubic yards per 24 hours. So about 24,000 a day haulage in this fleet. We'll take the default, that sounds okay. And we'll load up the equipment timing SPO. So here we have the output from that surface equipment timing run. The pits, the benches, the time frame, the months in this case, and the volume showing up there. So we need to be able to sequence this out based on these time frames and the volume. We'll hit OK there. Just like equipment timing, you get this little tree structure window that shows you your spoil timing. There's the haul fleet I just defined. Here are the pits we're mining from, and here are the 2 spoil placement destinations, in pit and out of pit. Hit OK to take you to this screen where you do the sequencing itself. So for example, these are the available blocks of material, each pit and month in this case. And over here on the far right are the available spoil locations to move this material. So I'm going to take the January, pit 10, the first pit, bench 1, and I will move it over to the assigned block. Down below then you see this turquoise colored blue bar. That is the time frame. Now we'll move over to a placement spoil polyline for it, and let's take it to the out of pit since it's a box cut. I have out of pit bench 1 and move it over, and we'll take out of pit bench 2 or pit 2 bench 1, and then we'll go down to actually upper bench 1 and just keep on adding spoil lines until you accumulate enough spoil location to handle this volume. And so I'll just keep bouncing back and forth, throw a few more out of pit polylines over there, and then we'll stack it up higher onto the second bench. And we're almost there. So it tells you now how much percentage-wise of each spoil placement is used, and I finished up there now with 45% of that one used to accommodate that first January material right here. These are the shifts per day. So for example, this is the time frame, this is 1 month, and each one of these white boxes would be a shift. Choose your start date, etc. So now we'll go ahead and get the next pit block and move it over. So now we have 100% of that spoil placement was just used, and we have to now fill in additional spoil polylines for this. And this time we have in pit material ready to go, so I'll add that and move it over. And it took just 56% of that large box cut to fill it up. So now we're ready for the next one. We'll just start adding these over. And it looks like the order of these is correct, so I'm just going to add them all over and get ready to sequence it out. Now we go back and start adding and sequencing the spoil placement. So now I'm going to go with in pit number 2 and then go down to bench 2. In pit, let's remove one here. I'm going to take this one, in pit 2 bench 1, and move it over to the right. Let's go in pit 1 bench 2 and move that over to the left. And I'll just stagger back and forth. In pit bench 1 and in pit bench 2. Bench 1, bench 2. Bench 1, 2, 1, 2. And if we need any more additional room at the very end, we'll go and bring it to the out of pit spoil location. There's 7-1 and 7-2. Takes us down, so we ended up with 4% of that last one used, and we had plenty of extra room, and all these out of pit spoil polylines are now left empty. Okay, we'll go ahead and save this. We'll just call it test 1. Save it. We can go ahead and hit the calculate button in the middle of the window. The timing report lets you choose your report type. You could just do a straight year or months and years, or we could actually use what's in the spoil source file, and so it found those month period blocks right there. I'm going to hatch the period each month with this color coding. You can change your colors just by clicking on them. I will output new period grids. That'll put it into the sequence file for viewing, and I will use the equipment timing grids to append to that file. Hit OK, and it also needs bench grids to fill to. So I have an existing surface, which is the pit shell in here and the original ground out here. Bench 1 is at 4800 in both places, and bench 2, the top of bench 2 is going to be 4850. I select the sequence file, the timing sequence file where the source was ran, and here are the monthly blocks with their individual grids already made, and this is in the GSQ grid sequence file from the timing, equipment timing. That's the output, and then it will merge to those and append to that file. Now we'll watch it as it starts filling in. There's the out of pit, And now it's going to start filling in the spoil in pit. Okay, this brings us to the report formatter. We'll just go ahead and leave everything over there, hit display. And basically it's a great report that tells you where the material came from and where it goes to every period. Spoil timing report. Exit and exit. Brings you back to the spoil timing window. We'll go ahead and just hit OK. Now that the timing is run, we can play back the simulation as a movie to watch the mining advance and the spoil backfill follow along. It's under reserves timing, view 3D surface history. There's the one we output. There's a list of all the grids in it. It'll load up all 16 grids since there were 16 periods or months in this case. And we'll go ahead and render, and there is the first period as it runs through. We'll tip it down on the side, look at it in 3D. So there's our first month's mine cut, box cut, and here is the out of pit spoil we defined. And now you watch the backfill in pit in 2 benches follow the mine advance. And there's the finished plan with the empty spoil pit 7 ready for some regrade reclamation. Alright, well, this concludes a quick overview of the spoil timing.